Hi, welcome to Trait Talking. I'm Dr. Stuart Grice. So today we're going to be talking about what causes illness, disease, aging and ultimately death. And we're all in a position where we're trying to do the best things possible to stay as healthy and increase our vitality for as long as possible. But a lot, as you probably know, a lot of the advice given is quite high level and glib. And really understanding our biology gives us the ability to make better predictions of what our health risks might be in the future, but also enable us to target what we do to stay healthy for longer and to sort of predict what might happen to us. And of course, this is the central component of this is understanding what increases our risk of getting ill or getting frail or ultimately dying. And also understanding what keeps us healthy as well, what things are the best things for us to do to be healthier, stay healthier for longer. And this is fundamentally driven by a few components. We know it's our genetics, it's our diet, it's our lifestyle, and then the social economic circumstances we sit. But there's always been a bit of debate on what really is driving our illness and our mortality. Is it genetics? Or is it actually the lifestyles we live, the environments we operate in? Are these the key factors that are really driving our illness? Now, there's been a paper out this month that looks at this on a population level, and that's something worth bearing in mind. It's a population level study, so it's not really personalised to the individual, but looks at the contributions of genetics and what they call the exposome, so what you're exposed to throughout your life. It's just a posh term for your diet, your lifestyle, your behaviours and your social economic circumstance. Which of these contributes the majority of your mortality risk? So this is in a nutshell what we're going to have a look at. And is it really your genome or is it your exposome, all these different lifestyle and environmental factors? So a bit of a messy sort of set of graphs, well, not messy, but just sort of lots going on. Here is a diagram, a figure from this paper, and I've selected one bar at the moment, and this is looking at all-cause mortality. So when looking at all the individuals that died within the study, what proportion of the relative variance of the increased risk was associated with age and sex? And of course, when you think about sex, there are certain conditions that actually are more sex specific. Cardiovascular risk is higher in males, osteoarthritis or osteoporosis, should I say, is higher in females. Then this component, which is the exposome, so which is the environmental component, and then the PRS is polygenetic risk score, so which component is genetics. Now, if you look at this chart at the moment, we have age, which is a significant component along with sex, and that makes sense. The older you are, the more likely you are to get ill and to die. Then the other major component is this environmental section, this environmental component. So this is saying actually genetics has very little to do with your mortality. Now, a few caveats here. This is looking at polygenetic risk scores. So this is the state of the art at the time of the publication of the paper. Now, the polygenetic risk scores are getting better all the time. So this data will not be saying the total amount of heritability, the total genetic component to mortality. This is more knowing what we know today, can we predict? And they're saying that the exposome predicts a lot more than genetics does at this stage. Of course, age being the major component combined with sex. Now, this is great. So what is in this component of the exposome? And unsurprisingly, well, we have age and sex described there. We have the usual suspects of what's causing mortality. So we have smoking status, employment status, everything else, sleep, physical activity. Again, so as we're sitting here today, okay, well, we all know we're going to die. We know we're on this trajectory where we want to maintain a healthier life as possible for as long as possible, and we've now have this information that is telling us we do the things we're probably thinking about or doing already. Now, this is not to disrespect this paper. This paper, I very much dig into it. There's references on some of the slides. It very much understands and analyses the exposome through quite a good robust statistical analysis. However, any of these things you are looking at the moment are not causing mortality, they're correlated with mortality, and that's very key, and they're very strong to mention that in the paper. But what you get then is everyone jumping on the bandwagon for your clickbait, what to do to live longer sort of graph, which draws in hopefully subscribers for The Economist, is what they're aiming for, and it tells you, well, stop smoking, get some sleep, move in with your partner, again, social interaction, very important, be active and get a job. So basically, get married, get active, get a job. It sounds kind of like a political statement. Also, eat cheese, which is obviously great for the cheese eaters. But as you can see here, if you're really trying to think about your health, this is not really telling you any much. I'm sure most of the people watching this podcast or video know this already. So something's not adding up here. So we've got all this signal of lifestyle and environmental information telling us this is what's causing us mortality, but we all know really we're going to die of something, so it doesn't add up. So that's actually, we know when we lump things into big categories like all-cause mortality, you lose a hell of a lot of signal, and we don't really understand the different components of mortality, because again, this is a population of 500,000 people, just shy of 500,000 people that's been looked at, and actually it doesn't represent you as an individual, because you'll have different risks compared to the broad sort of sum of the population. So let's now, and this is what they did in the paper, break down these risks, these increased risk of mortality based on common conditions and diseases. And as you can see here, the picture is very different. So remember, the yellowy colour is predicted genetic components. The sort of greeny taupey colour is the exposome, so the environmental component, and then age, which is very key to a lot of diseases, and sex, which is in the purple colour. A few housekeeping components. So it is liver cancer and lymphoma don't have polygenetic risk scores associated with them. The second point is we've got sex as one of the components that it's been mapped against, but breast cancer, prostate cancer, and ovarian cancer, of course, are sex specific, so they will not have that. They'll only be based on the three model of age, exposome, and polygenetic risk score. But what your take home here is you can actually see very different patterns of genetic risk versus exposome risk, environmental risk, depending on different diseases. So this is where you start to tease out, actually, as an individual, my risks may be highly genetic or highly environmental, depending ultimately on my genetics. So let's look about this in more detail. So let's look at three conditions. You've got COPD, you've got lung cancer, and you've got esophageal cancer. So these are very much driven by environmental lifestyle factors, and it makes sense. You have esophageal cancer, which is what has been known as the Bohemian cancer. Risk is increased massively from smoking and drinking combined, is what the late Christopher Hitchens, Martin Amis, and Philip Larkin all died of. All writers, smokers, and drinkers in probably equal measure. So this kind of makes sense that you've got a lot of signal within the system, within the analysis, that's showing these conditions that are massively driven by lifestyle factors. Now, of course, if you're not a big drinker or a smoker, these may not be the conditions you're looking at. Now, let's go to the other end of the spectrum, and let's think about the conditions that are associated with high genetic risk. Now, what you have here is the three of the sex-specific cancers. Now, you've got breast cancer, you've got prostate cancer, and you've got ovarian cancer. Now, just one thing to point out, these polygenetic risk scores do not have a lot of the rare mutations. Now, rare mutations are ones that only will exist within a few people in the population, so they're not used to generate these polygenetic risk scores. However, there are many, many different rare mutations within the broad population, all associated with different diseases, be it breast cancer, be it dementia, be it cardiovascular disease. So we're looking at polygenetic risk here. And what you obviously can see is for these individuals, the genetic risk is the biggest driving component of getting the disease. Now, if you think about someone like, prostate cancer, so a good example is Sir Chris Hoy, a famous British Olympian who has just been diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. So, unfortunately, maybe, 5 years left to live without any significant change in the current therapeutics. Now, his father had prostate cancer and his grandfather had prostate cancer. So, smoking, get rid of, sure. Marry someone, great. Get active. The key take home here is screening and early screening, and this is something he's a big advocate for now. But here's an example of where knowing your genetic risk, and this doesn't mean getting a genetic test, it could be understanding your family history, should drive you to think about getting tested. And I think this is a really big, these are highly genetic diseases, and it's really important to understand that risk. And there are genetic tests out there, not through fitness genes, but other people that you can actually look for these risks. But again, this is, going back to what kills people. Well, generally there's a lot of lifestyle factors, but actually for the individual who's healthy, it may not be the case. Now, again, go to something like dementia. Now, you may think, of course, age is a big component of dementia. Here you have Alzheimer's disease, all-cause dementia, so broadly including things like Lewy body and then vascular dementia. And again, you've got a significant genetic component here. So we know that there are genetic variants that are big drivers of dementia. So again, yes, lifestyle factors are a big component of dementia. But here, this study is showing that actually the genetic component is really important. And as dementia is a disease that can start decades before you start to see any presentation in the clinic, actually understanding your genetic risk can enable you to change your lifestyle. And we know that social interaction, socialization within your community, building relationships, obviously physical exercise, certain diets, particularly Mediterranean, increasing omega oils. There's lots of components that actually can help you maybe not stop getting dementia in the long run, but actually can kick the can on it. So actually understanding this genetic risk is very important at targeting the way you live your life, and that there's examples with Chris Hemsworth where he's changed his life. Again, with creating capacity in the cognitive system is really important. Lifelong learning, exceptionally important for individuals like that. Again, you could tease that out with the social economic components of the lifestyle factors that are presented in the study. But again, when you start to understand where your risk is, and again, these are population growths, but you can understand actually you may not have high risk for liver cancer or esophageal cancer because you don't drink, you don't smoke. Liver cancers, you don't drink, you've not been exposed to hepatitis. However, these other conditions, some may require, if you know of family history, some may require you to go and get screening, and some may just to reevaluate your lifestyle, like with the cases of Alzheimer's. And again, here's just another one that I'd like to sort of finally look at. It is in type 2 diabetes. Now, a lot of, obesity is not on here because obesity is not classed generally as a disease, but it is a driver of many of these diseases. But if we're looking at type 2 diabetes, one would have assumed that it would have been mainly the exposome, so lifestyle, but actually there is a significant genetic component. Now, we know that the lifestyle and the genetics really are really interacting. So there's some people on certain diets that may be increasing their risk of insulin resistance. We do at Fitness Genes look at a lot of traits associated with blood sugar or associated with lifestyle factors and also genetic factors. And we can start to really understand the etiology, the broad etiology of what type 2 diabetes in. And I guess this is, and I don't really like to criticize this paper, it's a good paper, it's a very interesting paper, but actually type 2 diabetes in itself is not a single condition. So this is nearly sort of 6 years old now, a paper by the McCarthy group that looks at diabetes, and the fact is actually diabetes is not one thing, but it's lots of different component pathways. So, you are secreting insulin. How does the insulin act in your muscle? How's your glucagon secretion like? What's your adipose distribution? What's the function of your beta cells? You can start to understand actually the different components on any given individual, and this is based on the combination of your genotype, so genetic risk and genetic information, and also phenotypes, so direct measurements of adipose tissue, knowing your weight, knowing your activity, knowing components of your diet. And there's this kind of a chart on the side shows that actually you have this sort of two-dimensional space where you're driven towards diabetes, but not necessarily by having the same combination of risk factors. So actually really understanding the broad nature of your personal risk factors is really important. And this is kind of what we really like to do at Fitness Genes, where we combine your genetic and environmental data to help you understand your health better, and then to kind of give you an idea of where really to best focus on your health journey. So I hope this is interesting for you guys. I think the take home is genetics is very important. It is condition specific. Now, if you're the more healthy life you're living, actually probably the greater proportion that genetics may be having on your increased risk of mortality. But ultimately is knowing your genetics and your environments, your lifestyle in combination. That combination is key to understanding the risks and ultimately targeting the solutions for living the best healthy life you can. Thanks for listening.